Konnichiwa.
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 こんにちは。9回にわたって続けてきた発音とリスニングのクイズも今回の10回目で一旦終わりです。今日は総仕上げとして基本的な挨拶の発音をマスターしましょう。クイズは最後に2問だけ出題します。先ほどたくさんの日本語学習者のこんにちはを聞いてもらいました。どうでしたか？皆さんの発音に近いものはありましたか？動画の中の女の子は間違った発音を指摘して直してあげた方がいいのか迷っています。多くの日本人はこの女の子と同じで教えてあげたくても結局は躊躇してやめてしまうでしょう。友達の外国人にすら面と向かって指摘することは失礼なことかなと感じてしまうのです。でも本当は教えてあげた方がいい場合もあると思います。このことが今回のビデオを作ろうと思ったきっかけです。多くの方が初めに学習する日本語にはたくさんの挨拶の言葉が含まれていると思います。にもかかわらず挨拶の言葉がうまく発音できていない学習者が本当に多いのです。ですからなおさら今回は挨拶の練習で締めくくりたかったのです。今日はところどころ私自身の本当の声も使います。よろしくお願いします。では始めましょう。
Let's get started with practicing greetings. We will cover a few greetings that will be especially useful when you talk to Japanese people. Since there are only a few, be sure to master them. Before anything, some pronunciation tips. It's often said that when Japanese people speak a foreign language, they should open their mouths wider, tense their lips and the muscles inside their mouths, and move them more. This way, the pronunciation will sound more natural and won't have a Japanese-like voice. What I'd like you to do is the opposite of this. You don't need to tense your lips and mouth muscles too much. For example, when pronouncing, you tend to point your lips too much. It's not, it's, Did you know that the Japanese 50-kana syllabary or
50音
can actually be pronounced with very little mouth movement? If you're interested, please try the minimal mouth movement
50音
pronunciation challenge as well. It might be a bit different from what your teacher suggests, but I hope these tips will help you sound more like a native Japanese speaker. Now, let's start with the basic greeting we just heard.
こんにちは。
There are some common mistakes associated with this word. Please listen to two of the most typical ones.
Konnichiwa.
Konnichiwa.
This happens when people pronounce words based on the alphabet or are influenced by the phonics of their native language. This is especially common. Additionally, if the person who first teaches you uses this pronunciation, it becomes the standard, which can be problematic. Slightly off topic, but this also applies greatly to foreign language education in Japan, especially English education. Let's get back to the topic. When writing this word in the alphabet, it looks like this. And many people end up reading it according to their native language's pronunciation rules.
Konnichiwa.
Konnichiwa.
To avoid this, read it in
ひらがな。
It's best to start this habit with greetings. Since this is a short word, pay attention to the accent as well.
こんにちは。こんにちは。
By the way, the example of incorrect pronunciation also had the wrong accent. This is common for learners whose native language uses stress for accent, although a bit forced. Here's how it looks in pitch.
Konnichiwa.
Konnichiwa.
Now, let's practice the correct pronunciation.
こんにちは。こんにちは。こんにちは。こんにちは。こんにちは。
When you hear it spoken at normal speed, you might notice the pitch sounds different from the accent mark. Pitch accent has rules, which can slightly change the actual pitch. In this case, it's due to the in the second sound, but let's focus on the greetings pronunciation for now. Let's move on after practicing one more time.
こんにちは。こんにちは。
Then, please practice keeping the rhythm yourself. Well done. Practice every day and make it yours. Let's take a look at another one in the same way. This is probably the word you use the most. Is your pronunciation among these?
Arigato.
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 There are fewer noticeable mistakes compared to the previous words, but still, try to minimize the influence of stress accents and focus on pronouncing with pitch.
ありがとう。ありがとう。ありがとう。ありがとう。
To pronounce this word correctly, pay attention to avoiding rhythms and stress not found in Japanese.
ありがとう。ありがとう。
Okay, now, again, please practice keeping the rhythm yourself. Well done. When this phrase is made more polite, it becomes
ありがとうございます。
but since that's a bit tricky, let's save it for another time. Let me teach you something instead. Here's something I still encounter from time to time. I often hear Japanese learners adding
ありがとうございます。
at the end when making a request in Japanese, similar to how they would in other languages. However, this can feel a bit awkward in Japanese. Using
よろしくお願いします。
would be more natural instead. In addition,
お願いします。
is a very useful phrase and can be used instead of
すみません。
to call a store clerk. It's particularly helpful when you're not being noticed.
よろしくお願いします。よろしくお願いします。お願いします。お願いします。
From here on, other teachers might not teach this way. However, to pronounce
ます。
correctly, we'll intentionally count this part as one mora instead of the usual two mora. Although it's normally two mora, this approach can be useful for those who struggle with pronouncing,
ます。
so please try it this way. This technique can also be used for practicing
です。よろしく。よろしく。よろしく。よろしく。お願いします。お願いします。お願いします。お願いします。よろしくお願いします。よろしくお願いします。よろしくお願いします。よろしくお願いします。
Now, try marking the pitch yourself. It's a bit challenging, but give it your best shot.
よろしくお願いします。
Well done. Alright, it's quiz time. The first question isn't a greeting, but it's a word that often appears alongside greetings.
1問目。
皆さん。皆さん。
Which word are you hearing?
皆さん。
The answer is
皆さん。皆さん。
Let's listen to the other pronunciation as well.
みなさん。みなさん。
In fact, I've encountered a considerable number of Japanese learners and even non-native Japanese instructors who mistakenly pronounce
みなさん。
as.
みなさん。
This is particularly noticeable among those who first learn the reading in Romaji rather than hiragana and then read it according to the phonetic rules of their native language. This is why learning sounds through hiragana and katakana helps you acquire clearer pronunciation more quickly in Japanese. Another common pronunciation mistake for non-native Japanese speakers with this word is the final sound. First, listen to an example of a common mistake.
みなさん。みなさん。
Next, let's listen to the correct pronunciation.
みなさん。みなさん。
Can you hear the difference? Now, let's listen to them alternately. We'll repeat the incorrect pronunciation followed by the correct pronunciation twice.
みなさん。みなさん。みなさん。みなさん。
When the Japanese is at the end of a word, it is pronounced with the tongue still inside the mouth and the sound resonates in the nasal cavity. Unlike the English n, which involves touching the tongue to the gums, pronunciation issues often arise from tongue movement, which is not needed for the Japanese. On the other hand, there is also a group that mistakenly believes it's acceptable to add
さん。
to
みんな。
because they think
みんな。
and
みんな。
have the same meaning. However, this is incorrect.
みな
Can be used with
さん
as
皆さん
to address people politely, but
みんな
is used as it is
みんな
is already a familiar and friendly word, and adding
さん
would disrupt the rhythm and sound of the word, so it is not used with.
さん
Let's review the differences.
みなさん皆さん皆さん皆さん
Let's check the rhythm, or in other words, the pitch as well.
みなさんみなさん
Try marking the pitch yourself. Let's focus only on the correct answers. Very good.
2問目、
How do you pronounce this? Some of you might be seeing this word for the first time. Which audio is closest to your pronunciation? A,
良い一日を
B,
良い一日を
C,
良い一日を
A,
良い一日を
B,
良い一日を
C.
良い一日を
The correct pronunciation is
良い一日を良い一日を
If we forcefully convert the other two samples into hiragana, they would look like this. Let's compare the differences just to be sure.
良い一日を良い一日を良い一日を
Since we're at it, let's also master the rhythm.
良い一日を良い一日を
Now, let's try it on your own. Now all done, good job. The key to pronouncing this word correctly is to separate the two
い
sounds. They are not part of a single word but come from two different words combined, so they should not blend into
い
but be pronounced separately. If you'd like to learn more about these kinds of rules, let me know in the comments, and I'll explain them another time. Now, let's say this word together with the one we learned in the previous quiz.
皆さん良い一日を
That's all for today. Thank you for learning these wonderful words with me.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment. See you next time.